Hello folks, and welcome to Noob-Splaining. My name is Wolf. Now, if this is your first time around here, then this is where I explain the crazy, over-the-top world of Warhammer 40,000 that nerds like me love so much. In this particular series, I'm looking at the new combat patrol boxes, comparing them to the old versions, and giving you a basic idea of how the units should be used and what to add next to your collection. So, hit subscribe, grab a drink, settle in, and get comfy. Prepare for a Noob-Splaining session. Hello folks, so this week I'm having a look at the main Warhammer 40,000 starter sets throughout the years and rating each of them and finally giving my opinions on what would be the best starter box set ever. Right, so let's crack on, shall we? But before we do, don't forget, if you have $1 or £1 spare, please donate to my Just Giving page for the charity boxing event I'm doing in November this year. Thank you. The first version of Warhammer 40,000 we got was this book. No box set, just a book. Although this is the first official version for many people, for just as many others, myself included, it's not. You see, this version of the game is just an RPG skirmish game using just a handful of models, where your models can level up and get better equipment and so on. The lore for 40k at this stage was still very much in its infancy, and at this point I was a massive fantasy battle player at the time. I did eventually lay my hands on a copy of this book, and it had some really cool rules for campaigns and some great bits of lore. It also sowed the seeds for what would become an entire separate franchise itself. Fun facts, at this stage the Horus Heresy was barely a paragraph and the Primarchs were just human generals, not the gene-enhanced demigods we know them as today. Back then as well, Games Workshop was mainly showing love to 3 chapters, none of which were the Ultramarines. In fact, the Ultramarines were considered somewhat boring compared to the Blood Angels, Dark Angels and Space Wolves, who were, at the time, fucking everywhere. At this stage in the game, the only experience I had with the world of 40k was Space Crusade and Space Hulk. Space Hulk putting the spotlight on the Blood Angels, then Dark Angels, and then Space Wolves in that order, while Space Crusade featured the Ultramarines, Blood Angels and Imperial Fists. Now, I'm not going to lie, when I first looked at the cover of this book, I saw the Marines in blue and assumed it was the Ultramarines. But in my defence, like I said back then, I was mainly playing Fantasy Battle and the 40k universe was still being born. I had no idea who the Crimson Fists were. 6 years later in 1993, 2nd edition finally dropped, which for many was the first true edition. Me and a mate went 2 ways on this box set. He took all the Orc models, and I can't for the life of me remember what happened to the Space Marines. But over the next few weeks, we were absolutely abusing the school scanner and printer so we could both have a copy of the rules. The main thing I remember about this box set was we got lots of cardboard terrain, loads of war gear cards and counters, and even a cardboard cutout dreadnought. And who says Games Workshop are getting tighter as time goes on? They didn't even put an actual dreadnought in the box, and that decision is still the butt of many jokes today, but alas, many of them fall as flat as the cardboard cutout dreadnought. Come on, that joke was really fucking clever. Anyway, so we got Space Marines that were heavily depicted as Blood Angels versus Orcs for the first ever proper box set. The codexes for this edition were bumper thick volumes, filled with loads of lore and art, as well as everything you needed for your chosen faction, with most of the codexes nudging around 80 plus pages. Overall, I rate this box set 8 out of 10, mainly for nostalgia and the fact that you got every army's codex, although a simplified version, so you could at least play any of the factions straight out the box. Exactly 5 years later in 1998, 3rd edition dropped, and this time we got Space Marines again. Spoiler alert, we're always going to get Space Marines. This time, however, it was the Black Templars making their debut as the religious nutjobs they were, complete with 10 tactical marines and a land speeder. An actual fucking land speeder, not a cardboard cutout. And we're also introduced to the brand new faction Dark Eldar, now known as the Drukhari, in the form of 20 Kabbalite warriors and quite a few bits of plastic terrain. We also got a few weapon templates, but many of the other tokens and cards were gone. Also, the codexes seem to have developed anorexia, as we were missing most of the lore and other fluff like how to paint the units, etc. Each of the codex was pretty much just the core rules for that faction, and if you were lucky, your codex went over 30 pages. Many people were disappointed with 3rd edition, and quite a few stuck to 2nd edition for a long time after 3rd's release. Oh, and we also got those 2 stupid plastic measuring sticks that were only 12 inches long and tended to snap dead easily, so about as much use as tits on a flat fish, especially when most weapons had a range of 24 inches. Overall, it was 7 out of 10. The terrain was nice, but the measuring sticks were stupid, and it also needed more models. It's now 2004, and it's been 6 years before we had a new box set, and so this one dropped, and it was the first themed one with a narrative playstyle, over just get your models out and kick the fuck out of each other. It was also around this time that is when Matt Ward started pushing the Ultramarines to the fucking moon. His exact words were, and I quote, "The Ultramarines are the Space Marines, that all Space Marine legions and subsequent chapters aspire to be like them because they are so awesome and great and perfect." Sounds like a bunch of fucking Mary Sues to me. It was around this time that all the lore and love that Games Workshop had for the Blood Angels, Dark Angels and Space Wolves pretty much just stopped. The resultant fan backlash led to the Ultra Smurfs nickname and them all being labelled as Mary Sues. To face the Ultramarines in this box set, we had some Tyranid units, including Gaunts and Genestealers, and on top of that, a few plastic terrain pieces. The narrative of the game was that the Ultramarines had to rescue a downed pilot and his cargo of gene seed before the Tyranids ate them and all the cargo. It was fun for the first couple of games but soon got boring, but you could spice up the game by using those measuring sticks like darts and throw them at your opponent's eyes in an effort to distract them. Overall, 5 out of 10, the narrative game got boring really quickly. In 2008 we got Assault on Blackreach, which again featured the Ultra Smurfs, and the Orcs were back as the bad guys, marking the second showing for both factions so far. This box set was laughably unbalanced. You got an Orc Warboss, 5 Knobs, 20 Orc Boys and 3 Deathcopters. The Marines got a Captain, 10 Tactical Marine Squad with a Sergeant, a Flamer and a Rocket Launcher, 5 Terminators and a fucking Dreadnought. The object of the scenario was if the Marines didn't win in less than 5 turns, you're clearly shit and should not be allowed to play anymore. Oh, we also got some weapon blast templates and those 2 plastic stupid measuring sticks again. I still have all the Marines from this set and they ain't painted blue, I promise you that. I probably have those fucking stupid measuring sticks somewhere too. Overall, 8 out of 10, and despite how I put it, the Orcs didn't die instantly every game. Next we have Dark Vengeance, hitting shelves in 2012. The one thing this box set lacked was any kind of terrain, but this time we got actual Dark Angels and Khornate Space Marines for the first appearance for both factions. And those stupid fucking measuring sticks again. At this stage I'd stopped playing 40k, but kept up with all the other aspects of the hobby, and I always wanted this box set, but by the time I had the money it had sold out and I wasn't paying a scalper stupid money for it. Some nice models in there though. The Khornate army got Cultists, Chosen Marines and a Hellbrute, which looks absolutely stunning, while the Dark Angels got a Deathwing Command Squad, 3 Ravenwing Bikes and a Dark Angel Tactical Squad, meaning that if you wanted to paint this set as any other faction, you had a lot of Dark Angels or Khornate iconography to paint over or remove. Overall, 6 out of 10, purely on the lack of options with the models. They have to be exactly what's in the box. In 2017 we got Dark Imperium, and this caused quite a bit of controversy. Again, no terrain, but what we got was these stupid plastic floppy 12-inch measuring sticks, which were even more fucking useless than those red ones, as you couldn't even use these as a makeshift throwing weapon. It's also when the Primaris landed, which is where the controversy came from. So we have Death Guard Chaos Marines making their first appearance, versus Ultramarines Primaris making the third appearance of the Ultramarines. This is the edition that brought back Mortarion and Guilliman as playable models. The backlash against the Primaris was quite severe, as the fanbase saw them as a blatant cash grab in an attempt to sell more Space Marines to Space Marine players. I still have all the models from this set, and the Death Guard are still in my pile of shame. But the new Primaris models, whilst being thoroughly put down by the fanbase, myself included, as a blatant cash grab, they were so much more fun to paint than the old Astartes models. And again, mine are not in blue and never fucking will be. Overall, 8 out of 10. The models were great and were very well balanced for 2 armies. Moving on through the timeline again, it's now 2020, which was a bit of a shit year for most people owing to lockdown, but there was one little ray of light. That ray of light being Games Workshop's soaring profits thanks to the release of the Indomitus set. Unsurprisingly, the Ultramarines are back for their 4th outing, but they are now up against the Necrons making their debut in a starter box. There's no templates, no stupid measuring sticks or floppy things, and no terrains. Just the rules and a veritable fuck ton of high quality models. The box set basically gave 2 players a very good 1000-point-ish army each. In my opinion, this was the starter box set that gave you and your opponent the most for your money. That is if you want to play as Space Marines or Necrons. Overall, 9 out of 10. The core rulebook being hardback was a nice touch, and lots of great quality models. But one thing I have noticed is that it's just an introduction to the game. It was only 2nd edition that gave you access to all the codexes, albeit in a very stripped down version, but at least you could play each faction. And finally, our most recent box set, is the Leviathan box set, and it is the 5th time it has been spearheaded by the Ultramarines. And also the Tyranids are returning for their second go at being the biggest problems for the Imperium, and every fucker else in the setting. The number of models has gone down slightly for the Space Marines, but the Tyranids get an absolute metric fuck ton of units. Unfortunately, most of them are crap and not going to last long, but if you play as either Marines or Tyranids, it is a great place to start. Overall, an 8 out of 10, purely on the fact that the rules are still available for free, and if you were clever enough to download all the codexes, or at very least the data cards, then you have access to every faction. Now, each of my scores for each of the box sets is assuming that you, or someone you know, can use between you all the models in the sets. The only exception to that is the Indomitus set, as the price you paid for it made it worthwhile if you played either Marines or Necrons rather than both that are in the box set. And herein lies the problem with these starter sets. So looking at them objectively, they are supposed to be starter sets, not bolster your army on the cheap sets. Most of the complaints I've heard about any of these starter sets revolve around players wanting a fuck ton of models for their faction at a massive fucking discount. You forget, this is Games Workshop, that doesn't happen. If you're already playing 40k, these sets are not aimed at you. That is why they have always sold the core rulebook separately. If you happen to collect or want to collect one or both of these factions, and you need the edition's core rulebook, then possibly they are a good deal. You see, the whole point of these starter sets is to get players hooked on 40k, and frankly, they are very limiting. I mean, if you're going to get into dirt bike racing, you wouldn't buy a Harley Davidson or a Kawasaki Ninja to see if you like riding first. You would get a cheap dirt bike and then get better ones as you progress through the hobby. So Games Workshop are missing a massive trick here. If they offered a starter set that consisted of the core rulebook, a combat patrol of your choice, and its codex, even if that rulebook and codex is a digital version, better still, 2 core rulebooks, 2 different combat patrol boxes and the relevant codexes, and that way you and a friend can go halves on it and get stuck straight into the game and start looking at what you want next. I mean, come on Games Workshop, there's a massive opportunity to make a fuck ton of money there, and you don't normally miss a trick like that. I mean, I would pay just a little bit more than the price of a combat patrol box to also get the core rulebooks and the codex for that faction. Would you? In fact, I would probably end up buying combat patrols for factions that I might get around to playing at some day, especially if it came with the codex. So there you have it folks, that's my opinion. The ultimate 40k starter set should be a combat patrol set with its codex. And I don't mean these little codexes they're giving away free online just cover the contents of the combat patrol box. It should be the entire fucking codex. Well, that's my opinion anyway. Catch you all next week. And so there we have it folks, and that brings us to the end of this video. If you made it this far and haven't subscribed yet, please do so. If you're still listening at this point though, thank you for taking the time to watch my content, and I have another small favour to ask of you. Like the video, leave a comment, but most importantly, remember to show it to someone who could do with some noob-splaining in their life. Take care folks, I'll see you next time.